Hi there. Today I'll be showcasing my Natalya Marauder Cluster Arrow build. I use this for the solo Demon Hunter Greater Rift level of 121. See the link below for more details, so let's get started. So the build is a fire variant of the Cluster Arrow build, requires a lot of area damage to function properly and therefore requires a lot of enemies to be clustered tightly together to increase the damage you do. So I'll be going over several aspects during this 121 clear. So the first thing you may be noticing is to make sure that all your buffs are up at all times. In particular, the most important buff is the Rain of Vengeance buff. So make sure you're constantly using that. What makes it more important though is to aim where you fire it. So notice that I'm aiming it specifically on enemies either in melee range or on elites to keep them packed together. So that's the first thing you want to notice. Next thing is the sentry placement. I want to make sure that I create kind of a network of sentries such that all the sentries are capable of firing on any given target at any time, while also being close enough to the target so that it procs the Bane of the Trapped effect as well as the Cull of the Weak effect so that they're slowed. So as you see here, I was lucky and I got a channeling pylon, so this pylon will enable me to attack without needing to worry about my hatred and resources for the moment. It's important to not just spam Cluster Arrow, but also to make sure your sentries remain in a good position, as well as using your companion regularly, since it does not interrupt your Cluster Arrow attacks. Next, since I'm using the Wraps of Clarity, it is very important, especially in this level of Greater Rift, to make sure that you use your Hatred Generator at least once every 5 seconds to maintain a suitable level of toughness. Now normally this is not an issue since I'm not running Cinder Coat, so I will be needing to generate hatred a lot of the time. It is important during channeling pylons to remember to use your generator so that you don't die during the buff duration. So now that we've talked about the sentries and the Rain of Vengeance and the evasive fire, let's talk about Vault. So this build has a limited amount of resources in terms of discipline, unlike the more popular Impale build where you can vault for free with the Chain of Shadows belt, or the Unhallowed Essence set, which has an enormous amount of discipline and the ability to regenerate discipline either through preparation or by using your generator. So the Natalya Marauder set does not have any discipline generating features, so you have to be very careful not to run out of discipline, especially during difficult fights with many elites using many different abilities at the same time. So it's important to walk if you can in some places and only vault when necessary. In this video I vault more freely because I don't have to worry about too many deadly enemies, but some maps with, say, winged assassins or other types of enemies becomes more difficult because of the number of times you need to vault. And lastly, I want to talk about Cluster Arrow. It's important to save your resources for the fire cycle, which is preceded by the cold cycle, so it's very important to attack with your generator during the cold cycle to make sure you have a near full hatred pool during the fire cycle. You can also attack during the physical cycle so that you can generate hatred during the lightning and cold cycles. So the order goes fire, lightning, physical, cold, and then fire again. So now, as you notice, I did find a conduit pylon, but I do not hit it immediately. I want to thin out the crowd a little bit so that the lightning strikes attack specifically the elites if possible. So this is fortunate to get a conduit pylon in a dense rift. That's what you're looking for. Now I'm standing in the Oculus bubble there, that yellow ring on the ground. It does not affect the conduit damage, but it does affect your damage. So if possible, It's important to stand in it. Of course, if there's things like arcane beams, it's important not to risk dying in these arcane or molten explosions and things. So it's important to try and use it when you can. Sentry kills do not proc the Oculus bubble appearance, so it's important to not to use it when you can, since you won't always have it. So here I was fortunate to get a speed pylon. A speed pylon is not the most important pylon. It's probably the least useful out of all the 5 pylons you can get for this build. The most useful being, of course, conduit, followed by power for the boss. Then probably the next one would be channeling or shielding, depending on the situation at hand. If there's a lot of enemies that are very dangerous, shielding can be a very strong pylon to get. And of course, then channeling is good for the ability to just use all your abilities and resources without a care in the world, assuming you can tank hits while you're firing. And lastly, speed pylon is useful just for moving around mostly, but the extra attack speed doesn't help tremendously due to the faster hatred spending, so you're going to run out of your hatred pool very quickly. So now I'm going to go into the gameplay. As you noticed in the first floor, we collected a lot of elites. So the idea is to try and get at least 2 elite packs with some extra monsters around it. So if you don't have 2 elite packs or more with some monsters around it, it's important to just keep pushing ahead to try and kite and bait the elites to follow you. Some elites are better at following than others, depending on the monster type, and also depends on if they're Juggernaut. Juggernaut will follow you more readily, also Teleporter. Because Juggernaut will follow you easier because they won't be slowed by the sentries, so it makes it so they can move a little quicker. So again, just highlighting the style, so try to avoid damage when you can. Keep your distance. So this is using the standard cluster arrow setup that uses the Zai's Stone of Vengeance. So you want to increase the distance between you and the target if possible. The damage is calculated between you and the target, not the sentries and the target. It has been changed in the past. And so this enemy is Juggernaut, and so I will not stand there to try and kill it because it's going to take a long time, so it's important to just keep moving on and attack during the fire cycles, but during the other cycles just to keep trying to gather more things to kill. So this is a slow pushing build, so if you don't have the density, this build will not work. So just for comparison, getting this Greater Rift that you're watching now took approximately between 50 and 100 Greater Rift keys. So the idea is you want to start in a nice big open map, either the battlefields as we saw in the previous segment, or Festering Woods is another excellent choice for the starting level. So if you can get those, that will generally put you in a good position because of the nature of the sentries, that they can attack more easily in big open spaces. So again, it's important to just keep gathering more and more things. So here I now have 2 elites, the Juggernaut that followed me all the way from the beginning, plus a champion pack. So the Juggernaut just died, and I was fortunate that there was another champion pack located nearby, so one of my sentries was able to tag it. And so now I'm focusing on killing things. I'm quite ahead on the clock, so this is already a good point where I'm feeling confident that this is actually going to be a clear. So typically with this build and with the attributes I have with Paragon 1641, I have about 19,000 dexterity, but I'll be having this in the link below so you can see exactly all my item rolls. So typically the boss takes between 2 to 3 minutes depending on the type of boss, so it's very important to get as far ahead on the clock as possible. So this is one of the important things about this build. Unlike the Impale build, this build struggles with bosses, so it's very important to keep that in mind. So even if you think you're on time, remember that the boss does take several minutes. So it's fortunate whenever the Templar procs the S of Johann amulet to gather everything together, because then the area damage will be more and more effective. Here I just decide to finish off this one elite since he's already on low health. Make sure you grab all the purple orbs before continuing, don't leave any behind. So luckily I find some more density over here with all these zombies. So at this point I'm feeling very confident that this is going to be the clear for getting this Greater Rift 121, because I do have over 3 minutes on the clock, and I'm almost spawning the boss, and there's a lot of density clustered together, so this is very fortunate. So again, make sure that you keep the convention of elements in mind. Also, it's important to stand still as much as you can to make sure that the Endless Walk set is always in the full damage. But if you are taking too much damage, it's important to keep moving so that you get the damage reduction. So at this point, I found the power pylon. This is when I smiled a little bit, saying, okay, this is definitely going to be the one. It's important to save it for the boss, and even when the boss appears, it's important, since it lasts 30 seconds, to set up your sentries in a good position before activating it. So it'll give me 2 complete fire cycles, and so the first one you'll see in a moment. This is where the damage really ramps up during the fire cycle. This boss has about 5.5 quadrillion hit points, so you can just imagine how much damage I did during that fire cycle. So this boss is going down extremely quickly, so this is not typical without a power pylon. So with that, I cleared it, and I hope this was helpful, so thanks for watching.